Hello, and welcome to Badger Talks Live, bringing you engaging speakers from your UW flagship campus. I'm Alexandra LeKind, and I am a doctoral candidate in Curriculum and Instruction in the School of Education and Environment and Resources at the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. I am honored to introduce Erin Fay, who is the Assistant Director of Public Humanities at the UW Center for the Humanities. Today, Erin will be talking about Humanities Responders, a new UW-Madison initiative funding and supporting social justice projects using the skills of the humanities to serve and bolster the work of community organizations, nonprofits, cultural institutions, and public agencies during the pandemic. Unlike the first responders, who work at sites of public emergency, Humanities Responders are UW students recognizing the invisible crises left off the front pages and collaborating with local leaders to build resilience for the future. In fact, thanks to Erin's support, I am currently a Humanities first responder, working with Kate McCrimmon at Satellite Family Childcare and Madison Public Libraries to implement a bilingual professional development series to support family childcare providers who do extraordinary work for society and have taken on even more in response to COVID-19. In addition to his work at the Center for the Humanities, Erin co-directs the reading series Monsters of Poetry and the creative writing workshops at the Bubbler in Madison Public Library. He is a graduate of the creative writing programs at UCLA, UC Davis, and the University of Oregon. Let me extend a warm welcome to Erin Fay.
Thank you, Alexandra, and thanks Badger Talks Live for having me and the Center for the Humanities. I'm so excited to be here and to share what we've been up to this year during the pandemic. So like Alexandra said, this is about an initiative we started called Humanities Responders. And I was looking back at my files and I can't believe we started this initiative just a few weeks after lockdown happened in March. So at that time, I think like everyone else, we were asking ourselves, what could we do? What can we do to help? What can we do? It looks like this is going to last a very long time, perhaps. And so in our case, what can the humanities do in times of great social crisis? That was really the question we were asking ourselves. And like Alexandra mentioned, this is our answer is social justice community engagement grant for graduate and undergraduate students at UW-Madison to work in collaboration with community partners here, but also in other states and globally in communities that they're already sometimes involved in. So this initiative wasn't pulled out of thin air. We built on 2 decades of connecting students with community partners. That's what our center has been about for a very long time. But first I want to back up a little bit and examine maybe common ideas and conceptions of what the humanities means to people. And so this is a word cloud of the different humanities departments at the university. You see different languages, different cultures, literatures, history, philosophy, music, art. All these are different reflections of the human experience. And when we think of these disciplines, though, we often think of them as happening within the university or at least within the classroom. Like we think of professors giving a lecture. We think of students in archives and libraries. But what happens when we think of the humanities outside of school, exiting school and entering into the world, especially one experiencing a global pandemic? So often when people think of the humanities exiting the classroom, they think of book clubs, they think of lectures, professors standing in front of a group of people, very much like how I am now talking to an audience. We think of humanistic people, people who study the humanities, imparting knowledge and sharing their knowledge with others. Which is a wonderful but traditional definition of a public sense of the humanities. And so what a former colleague of mine used to call this sage on stage, a grand wizened person imparting their knowledge to others. And how about those students who are doing this work? They often get labeled and seen as interns or volunteers in the community. Academia often calls this service or outreach into the community. And what we've really tried to do is fight against this stereotype of humanities people out in the world. And partly how we've done that is reframing the way people think about public humanities. We are in the business of genuine collaboration, basically. We immediately saw, especially under the pandemic, the need for humanities to collaborate with community partners to create big impacts on society in a timely manner. Community needs, and definitely not the pandemic, they don't run on a semester schedule. So we wanted to do everything we can to connect students and humanities folks with partners to do real work this year. So in terms of that intern stereotype, we are trying to frame our students as people who have skills beyond the academic skill set, or at least they can translate their academic skill set into places that might be unexpected. They can use their critical analysis skills and writing skills across audiences. They can network and build coalitions. They have skills in communication, marketing, publicity, you name it, they've got it. So these are just some of the partner organizations that our responders have worked with this year. And so over between March and now in December, we have funded and supported over 30 responder projects, which is really double the number of student projects that we engage with on an annual basis. So so we're really happy about that. But you might be wondering what happens when collaboration goes remote during a year of social crisis and uprising. Well, a lot of these organizations, they were looking to, or in our discussions with them, they were looking to strengthen themselves. You know, this is a time when I think a lot of us started to look inward and raise our own capacity for the future and be optimistic about the future. And part of that optimism is forming coalitions, building resilience, and building upon existing community strengths and wisdom. And how we do that is really through projects. So whereas a volunteer or an intern might be putting in a certain number of hours to contribute to a project, in this case, each responder is building a project from the ground up with a community partner. So this means that they have almost like how a consultant works with a corporation. They have a specific scope of project that they work on and a specific set of deliverables and outcomes that they're working towards. So yes, so I think you can already see that this is beyond just the typical stereotypical intern that you kind of imagine in your head, like grabbing coffee for the rest of the staff. So we've been looking for mutually beneficial outcomes, genuine collaboration, with a lens for equity. In terms of these community partners, we've tried to reduce all barriers to their participation and access to the university and its resources, and even doing some matchmaking to find the right students for their needs. For example, a community partner, we might be talking with them and recognizing, okay, you have this specific marketing need, and let us help you find the right student to help you through that. So a little bit of a breakdown of who we're working with here partner-wise. As you might suspect, a lot of them are nonprofits, but also from the corporate world, from the government agency world and other public agencies that are really struggling right now, as we know, and students are very interested in working with a wide array of partners. Partly out of self-interest, a lot of them know that the academic market for jobs is slowly shrinking and shrinking, and they're looking to gain skills in the non-academic world so that they're competitive for future jobs. So outcomes for these organizations as a whole: capacity raising, sustainable programming, communications plans, evaluations, and surveys for their constituents, oral histories, increasing institutional memory, and community presence. All of this has happened with these 30 projects. So onto the responders themselves, the students, who are, really points of inspiration and stars for me this year. These are some of their faces, and each of them we funded up to 12 months. And the project grants range from $1,250 to $2,600. And there are a lot of barriers for students to participate in programs like these. Students lead very busy lives, and everyone this year had to pivot to a whole new way of living and learning. And so we try to reduce all barriers to their participation as well by having rolling deadlines, so not having applications in by a certain date, creating cohorts from common interests. For example, if the students were doing theater projects or marketing projects or coalition building projects, I try to match them together so that they can compare notes and best practices. Non-traditional applications, some of these students came to me just as a conversation, some of them submitted videos, so that there isn't that barrier of, oh gosh, I need to write and submit this extra long grant application in order to participate. We didn't want that to be a barrier. And also, like I mentioned before, we put our ears to the ground to listen for community needs and see where those invisible crises are happening in our community, and so that we can matchmake them with the right student. Also, another thing we did try to do as an institution is privilege community and student points of view and de-emphasize faculty and staff points of view. We really saw ourselves this year more than ever as facilitators of community work, and mentoring and supporting and funding these projects, but really letting them shape themselves through student and community collaborations. Budget-wise, for those of you interested in the numbers, obviously this is a lot of money for a campus unit. And the grants that normally fund our student grants were canceled this year. So we've been usually we have a number of in-person lecture series. We've been taking money from those lecture series and reallocating money and doing everything we can to fund every viable student community project that comes our way and working with them for it to become viable. So I just want to say a few more things about the responders, which is they come from all walks of life and fields of study. Half of them are from the core humanities, but many of them are from social sciences, from the hard sciences, the core sciences, from health sciences and the environment. These are people who are all using humanistic skills already in their fields. And I think this shows how the humanities is wider and in an applied sense than just literature and history and philosophy. Also, like I mentioned, we've been doing this work for 2 decades with students, and we've tried to track our graduated students and where they end up job-wise. And we're happy to say that none of them are unemployed at the moment, and a lot of them do actually end up in tenure track higher ed positions. That was not an expectation of ours over the years, but we found that universities are valuing these applied humanities skills, these community engagement skills, as a skill set unto themselves. And also, as you might expect, these students are very successful in the non-academic job markets in K through 12 and corporate and other places and nonprofits that you might expect. So now I'm going to give 3 examples of responder projects, and just to give you some very specific, scenarios that happened this year. And before I launch into the first one, I do want to touch on Alexandra's project, which was, you would think that childcare providers would have some sort of network or pre-existing union, especially to gain professional development as they need. But that that organization doesn't exist. So really, as you might hope. So Alexandra worked with a number of partners to continue professional development for childcare providers through the public library here in Madison. And I think the one really brilliant thing about her project was that they created a completely bilingual space. So normally when we think of bilingual spaces, you think, okay, the non-English speakers are gonna get some subtitles. Like that's usually the best we can expect. But in this case, there were many Spanish speakers. I think fully half of the sessions, they flipped the script where there was a Spanish speaking speaker, presenter, and all the native English speakers or exclusively English speakers, they experienced the talk or the presentation through subtitle and through simultaneous interpretation through Zoom. They did this in the first few months of the pandemic. They figured out Zoom. It was extremely sophisticated, and I'm just so proud of the logistical work that they did to create a very equitable environment for all participants. And a lot of these Spanish-speaking childcare providers wouldn't have been able to do this professional development if not for Alexandra's and her team's work. So the first the responder project that I'll talk more fully about is Orion Risk. And they're an interdisciplinary theater studies student. And their project was called Gender Talks, which engaged trans and non-binary peoples here in Madison, Wisconsin, and also in their hometown in Iowa, which happened to contain a meatpacking plant, which, as many know, are hotbeds for COVID-19. And so, so what this project was Orion arranged for a couple of community conversations through Zooms and pairing two trans or non-binary individuals, one from Madison and one from Iowa. And they met for the first time live over Zoom while an invisible audience, including myself, watched. So they met each pair met for 10 minutes. And it was just this part of the project was kind of incredible over the summer watching this, because I think over 2 or 3 months, we had already forgotten what it was like to watch strangers meet for the first time. All of our circles narrowed drastically. And it was very moving to watch strangers, especially them each knowing that they're trans or non-binary, meet for the first time, share their experiences, how their gender expression has changed over the pandemic, what challenges they've met, what things that they found more alleviating about being trans during these months. And so what Orion did was take a transcript of these conversations and rearrange the language, not adding anything, but rearranging it into a piece of documentary theater, which they call Gender Talks. And so this was a one-act play meant for Zoom. This is not a play meant for a live audience or live production. It is exclusively for Zoom, exclusively for this year, really. And so Orion worked with a production company, a theater production company in Iowa called Rising Fire to produce this play. And so it had its world premiere in September. And it was incredible to, as an audience member, to watch a play reconstruct and rearrange these conversations that I had already heard and experienced, and really made an incredible piece of art that made me think about trans identity in a new way, especially under this health crisis. And I like to tell people that I never really expect student art projects. I expect them to be equitable. I expect them to be collaborative and fair and all these things that are best practices for public humanities projects. But I never expect the art itself to be great. But in this case, happy surprise, the art was great and very moving. And I'll say what Orion took away as a student went beyond the art. They experienced or gained skills in event management, community conversations, creative writing, networking, theater production. And for the partner organization, Rising Fire Theater, they had an incredible time too. I'll just read a little snippet from what they said. about the experience. Partnering with Orion on a virtual project has allowed us to produce and build a season while many theater companies are struggling. Being able to produce a premier original piece like Gender Talks has given our organization the confidence to look at more virtual options for streaming virtually. So this project literally gave them the tools and the experience to continue into the rest of the year, whereas others took a little bit longer to adjust to the Zoom world. So the next project I'd like to talk about is with responder Justin Huckleberry from the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, so an environmentally minded student. And she got connected with a Menominee activist community who were trying to and are trying to protect the Wolf River, which is a tributary in northern Wisconsin. And what the committee asked her to do was create a media campaign and a series of educational materials and panels to replace the in-person activism that was supposed to happen to combat this exploratory, harmful sulfide mining exploration that was supposed to happen, that might have happened if not for their activism. What happened was this series of educational panels, and they did this over a number of months. And again, like I said before, I never really expect activist projects to be successful, just as I didn't expect the art to be great. But in this case, Justin and the committee's work in this field were successful, and they managed to be part of a movement to stop this exploratory mining. And I'll say a little bit, I'll read out a little bit from Dee Sweet, one of the First Nations organizers. She said, "With Justin's help, we determine our audience is educators, scholars, grassroots environmental activists who are likely to use these social media and archival materials to increase awareness about environmental issues, Indigenous activism, and water protection in the state of Wisconsin." And so just like with Orion, I think Justin herself gained a lot of experience with coalition building, with building curriculum, using archival materials and presenting them in a public way, removing herself, decentering herself from the project, and highlighting the voices of others for a greater purpose. And we're so proud of her. And the final project I'll discuss is by Stephen Wang. And he's a journalism and mass communication student. And his project was called Queer We Are, Together We Heal, which was a media campaign that he did with a new coalition of queer organizations here in Madison. So the brilliant thing about this project was that this coalition did not exist beforehand. These are, despite all being queer-minded and led organizations, these were and are organizations that are incredibly busy. Several of them are deeply involved with this summer's Black Lives Matter protests and uprising. And so even to get them to the table was an accomplishment. The goal evolved. At first, the goal was simply to get these disparate parties together and find out what they had in common, what they wanted to work on. It became very clear that everyone was on board with addressing health equity issues. The big question is of this year and also of this program is, who are the invisible communities who are vulnerable at this time, and how can we help them? In this case, very present on their minds were the queer elderly, folks who are not getting the health care they need because they're so isolated, and other health equity issues that they were recognizing but didn't feel that they had the power alone to address. And so they gathered all these organizations, including Freedom Inc., Orgullo Latinx, Open Outreach, G-Safe, Our Lives Magazine, and they promoted collaboration among these organizations. They cultivated intergroup trust within the different queer communities, and they grew community capacity to address not just health equity, but hopefully common challenges into the future. Stephen was awarded just this past few weeks Outreach's Advocate of the Year of 2020 award, which we're really proud of. And the media campaign continues on by one of our undergraduate responders as well. So we're super proud of Stephen and what he was able to accomplish with a project that's so relevant and needed in all of our communities in Wisconsin, I think. So I just want to end my presentation with some takeaways. It's kind of tailored to maybe who I suspect is out there in the audience. For higher ed and faculty and staff, we really encourage you to support students who are embedded in communities already and to value their lived experiences as much as their academic skills and experiences. We encourage you to value community-based learning and research. And we encourage you to connect students to resources, funding if it's available, and if no funding is available, really just to have conversations with your students about their community engagement and how you can support them through mentorship even, or no-cost titles. That is just as valuable. And also to avoid the dreaded duplication that happens all the time in larger universities. For students, both in college and in K through 12, please have brave conversations with people that you're excited about, communities you're excited about, but maybe you've been, shy or scared to start that conversation. Now is the time to have those conversations and engage people that you're interested in. Believe in your lived experiences. They're just as valuable as your academic ones, and believe in your non-academic skills. That job you had managing a fast food chain or working in an office as a clerk, those things are just as valuable as the things that you're doing in the classroom. And look for support for your projects. There is someone at this university or in your community who is valuing the work you're doing and the ideas you're having and the impact that you want to have. For community organizations, we encourage you to please look for allies in the schools. Staff like me exists in each university that care about making connections and breaking down those walls between the community and the university. And we encourage you to really refuse, to recognize and refuse inequitable collaborations and refuse to perpetuate programs that exacerbate unfair demands on community partners. You should never feel like you're babysitting a student. You should never feel like you're just doing the will of the university. These projects should exist to serve you and your mission, vision, and values. And lastly, corporations and government agencies, we really encourage you to value humanistic skills, very simply, and to hire humanists and value humanistic skills, and especially hire humanists of color, who I found in my experience have the links to communities and the experiences to really make really strong impacts and outcomes during this pandemic and beyond. So I'll stop there, but I know we're going to go on to some questions if there are any. I'll hand it off.
Erin, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Fran Paleo-Moyer, Badger Talks producer here. What an interesting set of projects that you showcased today, all serving such great and different needs. Feel free, everyone, to post questions in the chat if you have them. And I did have a couple of questions as I was listening, Erin, and wondering, so you had mentioned that every campus has someone like you doing this work. Can you speak a little more to that? Like, are we collaborating with other campuses? And what do you know of work being done around the country in this regard?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm by no means an expert, and I think on the community engagement food chain, humanities is often on the lower end of disciplines that are valued in community engagement. We're definitely trying to change that. But I'd say that in terms of public humanities and engaged humanities, there is a center for the humanities at almost every higher ed institution. And there's also state humanities councils in every state who are funded through the NEH and are actively promoting this kind of work. In addition to the humanities world, there are community engagement specialists in every institution who are, there are different scales of what's going on, but everyone's working towards a vision, something that looks like this, if not, getting there with time.
Very interesting. Thank you. The other question that kind of I was thinking as I saw the variety of projects happening, and incidentally, we did post your email address in the chat if there are community organizations looking to engage with you. So Erin's email is in the chat. But so in terms of the picking these projects, is it that there are students that have a passionate cause that they really believe in, and that really sort of leads to these projects being developed, or is it really the application process, or is it, how does that work?
Yeah, this varies a lot, and there isn't sort of one path that always happens. Some students come in with a very clear idea of what they want to do. For example, I think Stephen did come in with the idea of wanting to do some sort of queer coalition, and this project is connected with his research as a journalist and as an academic. But he didn't necessarily know all the different partners he wanted to talk with in his project. So part of my work was connecting him with different partners and talking about like best practices and working with such a large, varied group. Sometimes, like in the case of Justin Huckleberry's Wolf River project, I believe the partners contacted her, or she was put into contact with those Menominee elders and activists. And the project kind of grew organically through their conversations with each other on what made sense. And sometimes community partners do come to us through our own networks and contacts and ask us to put out a call for applications, and we try to find the right student to match their need. So really any which way. I mean, like I said before, these community needs don't happen on one track. Like things don't always happen in the same way. And we're trying to reduce barriers to anyone's participation. And so we're trying to keep all options open so people don't feel shut out in any way.
Thank you so much, Erin. We've talked with a lot of people on Badger Talks Live on this series, and this is just another fine example of the great work being done on campus and the community partnerships that are developing. And thank you for reaching audiences that might not have been being reached through other programs that we're doing. So keep up the great work. Really appreciate hearing about it today.
Thank you so much, Fran, and I can't wait to watch more. They're so amazing, these talks.
Thank you very much. Well, everybody tune in next week. We have a very special Badger Talks Live, December 8th, next Tuesday at noon. We're going to be talking to the legendary marching band director, Mike LeCrown, who's going to be sharing funny stories and thoughtful reflections from his home office about his 50-year history leading the University of Wisconsin-Madison Marching Band. And what's also really exciting is his drum major from the last season, CJ Zabat, is going to be introducing him and sharing a few fun stories as well. So please tune in next Tuesday. As always, visit the website, badgertalks.wis.edu, to see the upcoming talks. We are going to break from mid-December to mid-January, but then we will come back with a full slate of live talks again this coming spring, January, end of January. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.